computer.
There we go.
All right,
Hi,
turn off
Ann.
that.
It's nice to see
Play
your
sound.
face.
You may get a message since the recording's begun that you have to tap a blue box that says, yes, you consent.
If you say no, I think it kicks you out of the meeting.
It does.
So don't click
Trust me.
no.
I've learned that the hard way.
It will let you back in, but you'll have to do it all over again. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your day. We will do our best to keep this to an hour, but when I first advertised this workshop, I thought it was going to be trustee basics and refresher and answer your questions. And then some big things came down the line and we have to tell you about them. So we're going to talk about Senate Bill 13 and passing your budget. And we're going to talk about KOMA and KORA and the new way or the proper way to go into executive session. We had the new 2020 KORA handbook that just came out and we've updated the way to do that. So we're going to share that with you. And then we're also going to talk about the ARPA grant that is opening up on Monday. It's the American Rescue Plan Act. And there is $2 million from the state library where a public library can apply for $1,000 to $25,000. So we will have time for that as well. So without further ado, because we have a lot to get through, let's get started.
And at any time, if you've got questions, you can unmute yourself or type it in chat and we'll grab onto your question and get it answered. We'll also stay out here hanging out in the cloud later after we're done with the presentation in case you have questions specific to basic trustee training, and then we'll get back to you with that as well.
And if at any time you don't feel comfortable asking that question out in the world, you're welcome to send it privately via chat to me, Patty Collins, or to Maribeth, and we'll make sure that Gail gets it on her list of things she's got to talk about. So.
All right, I'm Maribeth Shafer. We have Gail, Santy, and Patty Collins. We are your trustee trainers today. We are with the Central Kansas Library System. We have been to the state municipal training session to learn about Senate Bill 13. And so we are sharing that information with you. And just 1 second, I'm gonna see if I can.
All right, I'm gonna go get it.
Linda, can you mute your
I think I got
mic,
it.
please? Thank you.
If you could just mute your mic, if you have any background noise, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, Senate Bill 13 and your library budget.
Wrong way.
Wrong way. Senate Bill 13. So I have the breakdown for you, and I will also share in the chat the handouts, and one of those has the FAQ, kind of the quick answer from the state as well. So let me put that handout link back there to you. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Senate Bill 13 is a new tax law that just came through the legislature this year. It was signed by Governor Kelly in March. And what it does is it lifts the municipal lid that used to be on the budget where your city had a tax lid and the library budget was taken out before that tax lid was calculated. This removes that tax lid, and now instead of that is the revenue neutral rate. The revenue neutral rate is based on your mill levy from your previous year and then your current year's assessed valuation. The goal of Senate Bill 13 is to make taxing more transparent. And because with this process, you have to contact all your taxpayers. But I think it made it a little more complicated for us on this end. The goal is to encourage taxing entities to keep their mill rate or their revenue neutral rate, their taxes steady instead of increasing. And when you increase, then you notify your taxpayers and have an additional revenue neutral rate hearing. Okay, so here's where the challenge comes in. In June, your county clerks will provide your city with the revenue neutral rate. Your taxing subdivision, that would be the library, and then on behalf of the library, the city cannot levy in excess of the revenue neutral rate unless the procedure in the Senate Bill 13 is followed, and that is notifying each taxpayer by email or mail, and then having a revenue neutral rate hearing. Municipal services from the state recommend holding an R&R hearing to ensure that you levy the budget dollars that you need. Remember, revenue neutral rate refers to the mill levy and your evaluation, not your budget dollars. I will get to what that means in just a bit. If you do not hold a revenue neutral rate hearing and your assessed valuation goes down in November, which is where your final valuations come in, then your budget cannot exceed the published revenue neutral rate. So now that I have you thoroughly confused, let's break it down. Okay, your revenue neutral rate is last year's, your revenue neutral rate is last year's total property tax raised in dollars plus this year's assessed valuation. Yes, divided by, and then times 1,000. Okay. I'm sorry, math is involved today. Okay. So in 2021, let's say that your small library had a tax revenue of $4,147. I pulled these numbers from a real library, but then I played make-believe with it, so I didn't want to attach it to a real library. So you raised $4,000. Your property valuation in 2021 was $210,000, and your mill raises $210. So to raise your $4,147, you need a mill rate of 19.689. Now, to find your revenue neutral rate, which your county clerk should be able to give you, but to find it for yourself, you need to take your library revenue by your 2022 assessed valuation times 1,000 to get what your mill rate would be to raise the same amount of money as last year.
That would be your revenue neutral rate to raise the same as last year, right?
Yes, that's your revenue neutral rate. All right, so you plan to not raise your budget. You plan to raise the same amount as last year. So your 2022 budget is going to raise the same dollar amount as the year before. Great. You're in compliance with state aid, and you're also in compliance with revenue neutral rate. However, it seems on trend to assume that your final assessed property valuation may decrease in November. It has in the last few years, that the estimated valuation in June is higher than the final valuation in November. So the final property valuation decreased to $209,590, which means that your new mill rate to raise the same amount of money as the year before is now 19.786 mills. So to raise the same amount of money as the year before, you'd have to raise your mill levy. And if you do that, then you exceed the revenue neutral rate. Clear as mud? What do you do? How do you protect your budget? The state municipal services recommend that you hold your revenue neutral rate hearing before your budget hearing.
Yep. Now,
so yeah, go ahead, Gail.
I was going to say, now the exciting part about this presentation is coming up now. And yes, there will be a dummies for dummies, because you only need to know one thing out of this. Are you a district library? If you are a district library, you are your own taxing authority. You must just please do it. Hold your revenue neutral hearing between August 20th and September 20th before the budget hearing, and contact Maribeth for more information. CKLS has 2 district libraries. That would be Hillcrest in Cuba and Burr Oak.
All right. If you are a township or a city library, your city or your township would hold the revenue neutral rate hearing before its budget hearing. So things that you need to know if you are a city or a township library. The library board is the governing body of the library and sets the library budget. Work with your city to let them know that they will need to hold the revenue neutral rate hearing. And remind the city of library state aid, their maintenance of effort, those 2 tests. Did your budget, your dollar budget amount stay the same or increase, or did your mill levy stay the same or increase? What I'm going to say again, I'm going to reiterate it. Hold the revenue neutral rate hearing. At the revenue neutral rate hearing, you can pass a resolution to
Surpass the revenue neutral rate.
to surpass the revenue neutral rate. And then when you have your budget hearing, you could pass the budget for the dollar amount. And that way you can raise the dollars that you need for your institution, for your library.
Very good.
And what you would explain to the public, because this would be a public hearing, is that you're raising the same amount, your budget isn't increasing, and it might be increasing too, but even if you're staying the same, your budget isn't increasing, but because of valuation, your mill levy is, and that's why you need to have this revenue neutral rates hearing.
Now, it can get a little bit, let me take myself, there we go. It can get a little bit confusing because your city, if they're at all like mine, is bound and determined not to increase the revenue neutral rate. But I have to go to them and remind them that the library board is the governing authority of the library, and the library sets the budget. The city's responsibility in this is to levy the amount of money the library board says we need to run the library. Now, the city is the library board is the governing authority, and with that great power comes great responsibility. If you're in a community where something happened, something big wore out, or like the water tower
is gone.
Yeah.
The fire truck.
The fire truck needs to be replaced. You know that it's not your turn to stand in line and ask for a lot more money. So you won't. You'll ask for the same or $1 more, and that way you're guaranteed to pass those 2 tests that ensure that you get state aid and then CKLS aid. And we know this is confusing, and we're sorry for that. We didn't write the bill. We know also now that there are already committees working on the wording of the bill because a lot of it is ambiguous. One of the things in the bill that is ambiguous is the language that talks about who's the governing authority for, it doesn't say for who the governing authority of the library is. And that's why it's very important that you go to your city and just have a casual conversation and remind them that the library board is the governing authority, and that in order to ensure state aid and CKLS aid, you need to make sure you get the same dollars or $1 more than last year.
And remember how I said that this bill replaced the municipal mill levy cap, and that the library was pulled out? Well, now in this bill, the library is part of their mill levy calculation. So just by that alone, your city's mill levy will look like it's increasing because now the library is part of that.
That part of that calculation.
So just on that alone, your city should have to have a revenue neutral rate hearing. There is a question in the chat: do libraries need to hold this revenue neutral hearing this year? Yes. This is a unique bill because usually when they pass something like that, they give you time to adjust. So you just like next year. No, this is valid now. We have to do it this year.
And so Maribeth answered yes, that libraries need to hold this hearing this year. And yes, a district library must hold it this year to ensure your funding. For a public library or a city library or a township library, your city or township is gonna hold the hearing. The library itself does not need to, but you need to be actively partnering with them about this so they know about library money.
And to add to that, let's say you think you're good, you're not going to pass your revenue neutral rate, and you decide not to have a hearing. Should your valuations then change drastically on you and your mill levy no longer raises the amount that you thought it would, you can, and you don't have the revenue neutral rate hearing, you can only raise the taxes that your current mill levy raises. So back at my previous example in my math, if your new mill levy rate is your 19.667 will no longer raise the 4147. You can now only raise the money that your 19.677 mill levy rate could raise.
Right, so you're gonna get less dollars.
So you would get less dollars. Patty, you said you have a question?
Yes, I've got a question about, I think people are a little hung up on the hearing itself.
Okay.
What does it look like? Is it like the budget hearing where you present it to the public and if nobody shows up, then you just wait your 10 minutes and then you move on? Or what does it look like?
That's a very good question. So you need to have this is also stated out in the bill, do I have it in here? I think it's here. Your hearing must have be advertised 10 days prior, just like your budget hearing would be. Your revenue neutral rate hearing and your budget hearing can be on the same day in the same place, but your revenue neutral rate hearing must be before your budget hearing.
Now, we've put out a couple of handouts that make this about as simple as we can make it. And so we will make sure that you have copies of those again and print them out and take out them with highlighters or whatever it is to make it a little bit more understandable for you. I've reached out to our district libraries personally, and so we should be hearing from them soon. But most everybody on here, your city is going to be the entity that holds that revenue neutral rate hearing and that budget hearing.
I'm going to read to you, it's in your handouts, and I just put the link in the chat, the Kansas Senate Bill 13 communication, and it says, what is the timeline for the revenue neutral rate hearing? By July 20th of each budget year, you need to let your county clerk know, or your city needs to let your county clerk know if you're going to have a hearing.
Yep. And if you plan to exceed it, and you just say yes at that point.
Yes. And then between August 20th and September 20th, the taxing subdivisions, that would be your city or township, or if you're a district, that would be you, will hold their hearing. It has to be between those dates, August 20th and September 20th. Taxpayers will be notified 10 days prior, and the taxpayers must be given the opportunity to speak without reasonable restriction. At the end of the hearing, the governing body of the taxing subdivision will vote to pass a resolution to levy above the revenue neutral rate. The budget cannot be adopted prior to holding the revenue neutral rate hearing. If that happens, then your R&R hearing is void.
Invalid, right?
Is there a specific amount of time these hearings must last? Just like with a budget hearing, you would say that the revenue neutral rate hearing is going to be August 25th at 10 a.m. You must start at 10 a.m. And then you would need to open it up for public comment. And then if there aren't any, then you can move to a vote. If there is public comment, then it says without unreasonable restriction. So I think you can still say we're going to allow public comment for X minutes. I think that's still a reasonable restriction.
Yes.
And then you can say each public commenter has 2 minutes of that 15. However, you probably want to set a limit so you're not there all day. But an unreasonable restriction to say we're going to let public comment for 5 minutes total and there's 20 people in line. That would probably be an unreasonable restriction. By October 1st, the taxing subdivision that chose to exceed the revenue neutral rate will provide the county clerk with their adopted budget. So after your revenue neutral rate hearing, then you can have your budget hearing. When you publish them, I would recommend having them on the same day. Make sure they're at least an hour. I would say give up maybe 2 hours apart, just in case you have lots of public comment. You have to start the meetings when they're published to start. So if you have the revenue neutral rate starting at 10, and then you have the budget starting at noon, you have to keep to those times because that's what was published and that's what your public is going to come to the meeting expecting.
Yes.
What is at risk for not holding the revenue neutral hearing? The taxing subdivision cannot levy above the revenue neutral rate if you do not have the hearing. If they do
They have to
tax
give it
above
back.
that rate, they have to reimburse it or return it.
Yeah, they have to give it back.
So you saying yes, that we are going to exceed it is your safety net.
Yes,
Correct.
it's protecting your dollars of your budget.
And
Correct.
so when you say something like exceed, that sounds like I'm trying to get around something, but this is the safety net to ensure that the same dollars appear in your library for the next year.
Correct.
Correct. I'm going to pull up the infographic and then I'll share my screen again.
And I put in the chat, one of the reasons that we're training on this is so that you can be a helping friend to the city or the township. They often are not trained on library law. And sometimes you have to be the one that shows them that explains that to them.
All right, I am also putting this, I almost turned into Blue's Clues, this handy dandy infographic into the chat. There you go. Oh, I watched Blue's Clues in years. Okay. This infographic is from the League of Municipalities and it breaks down Senate Bill 13. House Bill 2104 is in conjunction with Senate Bill 13 and it pushed back some of these deadlines a little bit is one of the big things that it did. Okay, and here we have the tax rate. This is what you saw on the previous slide, how to figure out what your revenue neutral rate is. We also have the process for if you think you might exceed the revenue neutral rate. Here's the process. And please feel free to print this off and share it with your cities or your townships if you need any help with any of this information. Give us a
Scroll up a
call.
little bit, Maribeth. Under their helpful tips there, it says that the tax lid that's been repealed was about the actual dollars. The revenue neutral rate is about the mill levy, not the dollars.
Yes. Where is that up? Is that up here?
Yes, it's right there on the right.
Oh, okay, I see it. Yes, so
And that's why the formulas all have mill levy figuring out in there.
the key word here, the word that's causing all the hullabaloo is rate. If it was just revenue neutral, then it could be your budget dollar amounts. But because it's rates, we have to look at the mill levy. I'm hoping, but this is just my hope, that when they rework this bill in January at the legislature, they change the wording so it's now dollar amounts instead of rate. Because if you haven't noticed the big wrinkle, the big penny on the railroad tracks that's causing all this problem is that your revenue neutral rate is based on your valuation. You have to have your hearing in August or September, and you don't know what your final valuation is until November.
Right, and so that's why the revenue neutral rate is based on the prior year's valuation.
Prior year's mill
Sorry,
levy,
prior year's
but
mill.
this year's, right, but this year's valuation.
Yes,
So that's why it's complicated, is because the timelines don't match up.
right.
So it is what it is. We're going to help as much as we can. Questions on the revenue neutral rate
In Senate Bill 13.
and Senate Bill 13? It is a lot to kind of wrap your brain around. If you would like, I can share some more information that I got from the municipal services. If you'd like to delve further into that, I can share some of that information out with the group. I'd be happy to do that.
Can I say anything?
Yes, please, Steve.
I don't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I think it's going to be the safety net. I think most every city is probably going to have a revenue neutral rate hearing, just in case.
Just in case.
Even if they don't exceed it, you know, that's the safety net back there.
I
Thank you,
agree.
Steve.
At
Yeah.
the municipal budgets workshops, the presenter probably said, hold the revenue neutral rate hearing at least 100 times during the day. She said,
Mhm.
just hold the hearing.
Just hold the hearing. That's going to protect the budget dollar amount.
Yes.
And there may be cities and libraries that need to raise their budget as well. And so this is part of the process, but especially for those that are just trying to hold the line, you still need to have your revenue neutral rate hearing.
Yep. If we
Okay,
don't have
I
any-
want to go ahead.
I was going to say, if we don't have any questions, we can probably go on.
I am going to show the timeline here. You need to notify by the 20th, have your hearing between July 20th, have your hearing between August 20th and September. And then your governing body will firmly adopt the budget, and then it'll be certified, and it all has to be certified by October 1st. So there is your timeline. I'm also going to show, if you don't do the revenue neutral rate hearing, your timeline is moved up.
Will you show, Maribeth, will you show us your screen, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
PowerPoint. Thank you.
Yep. I can see it. Okay, let's try again.
But we
Here
aren't
is-
lucky enough to be at your house this evening.
I don't know why you can't see it. All right, so here is, if you're having the revenue neutral rate hearing, August 20th to September 20th, those are the dates to really keep in mind. And then your publishing of the budget and the certification of your budget needs to be done by October 1st. If you are not doing a revenue neutral rate, your timeline is moved up. You need to hold your budget hearing by August 15th, which means you have to publish your notice by August 4th. After the hearing, between August 15th and the 24th is when your governing body will adopt the budget, and August 25th is when the budget is submitted to the clerk. That is if you're opting to not do the revenue neutral rate hearing. Okay.
Moving on to a lighter topic. The Kansas Open Meetings Act and executive session. And so we purchased the most recent copy of the Kansas Open Meetings Act from the League of Kansas Municipalities. And what this changes is how you make a motion in executive session. That's the only change here. We've got two awesome cheat sheets. And
share those.
Maribeth has posted the links there. We'll also make sure to send these links out on our listserv so your library can print them. I'm the director of the Great Bend Public Library, and I have printed a copy of the cheat sheet and the template for a motion to recess into executive session, and I am giving them to every one of my board members, and we're making lots of copies of the templates, probably 10. We rarely go into executive session. Mostly it is once a year to do my annual evaluation, and I would expect it's the same for most of you here. But still, we've given you a template. It says the motion to go into executive session shall be made as follows. Governing body of the, you fill your name in here, library name, the date. The motion is I move that the governing body recess into executive session to discuss. And so for us, it would be the governing body of the Great Bend Public Library, and the date. I move that the governing body recess into executive session to discuss the director's annual evaluation. And then we would say pursuant to. Now it's this pursuant to, and you have to list the statutory justification. And then you still will say that the open meeting will go into executive session for 10 minutes. We'll resume a regular session at 7:10. So We've taught all along that there are basically 3 reasons that a public library will go into, a library board will go into executive session. It will be to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel. It will be to consult with an attorney,
Me.
which would be discussing attorney-client privileges, or it would be just for the preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property. So if the library were going to buy something, if there was some consultation that you needed with an attorney, you could go into executive session for that and to discuss non-elected personnel. So on Maribeth's most awesome cheat sheet, she's got this template, and then she's got a cheat sheet that has all the different reasons. She's got them highlighted. And then all you would need to do is to say pursuant to, and then she's got the statutory justification there. And here you can see this. So it would be a governing body of the Great Bend Public Library. And today's date, I move that the governing body recess into executive session to discuss library director's annual evaluation. And then it would be pursuant to Kansas statutes annotated 75-4319B. And this would be in parentheses after that, a number 1. And then the open meeting will resume at 7:10 in the Great Bend Public Library. So really the only change is that you have to use that pursuant to, pick your reason and write the statute in the blank. And if you follow this template, you're going to be doing it right. You also need to make sure that you use the template to copy the executive session information into your board minutes. Okay, Maribeth.
What I recommend is there'll be a template to print out. Make several copies of this and keep it in your board book so that when and if you ever need to go into executive session, you can pull this form out, fill it out, and then you know that it's going to be recorded the way it needs to be recorded.
So this is Patty. So if, as say we're discussing the director's evaluation, we've taken our 10 minutes, we've come back out into regular meeting, but we realized that we do not have enough time. Each time do we go in, do we have to have that full information in our minutes?
Yes, you do.
Yes, and that's why a lot of boards will say, how long do we think it'll take? Well, we think it'll take 10 minutes. We're going to go into executive session for 20 minutes. Now, if you're in executive session, you say you're going to go in for 20 minutes and it only takes 15. You can come out of executive session, but you can't start the regular meeting until that the timer dings for the 20 minutes. And we all set our phones so that we get it right.
And why is it that we have to let that time expire if it's just us in the room?
Because we're assuming, remember, all the library board meetings are open meetings to the public. We have to let the public know when we're going to be out of executive session. And that way, when the regular meeting will resume, and that way, for whatever reason, they could come back in if they wanted to. And also that way it goes into our notes and we're not going to get in trouble for a violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And you may think, well, I live in a small town. Does it really matter if I do this or not? Well, it does matter. And if you think it doesn't, you'll probably be hearing from your new good friend, Attorney General Derek Schmidt. Violations of the Kansas Open Meeting Act can carry a fine up to $1,000 per person per violation. Now, you may have heard us say at other trustee trainings that if the board is acting as a corporate body, the board can't be sued. The Kansas Open Meetings Act kind of throws that on its ear. And yes, indeed, each board member could be fined up to $1,000 per violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And that's why we've got this handy dandy, super easy template. And then the cheat sheet that tells you right there which reason you're going into executive session and how to write it on that piece of paper so it gets into your minutes the correct way.
So
Oh,
I don't see my list of reasons to go into executive session. I'm not sure what happened to it. I'll make sure it's in there. There are actually 15 in the
Oh,
law,
yes.
but only 3 of them apply to libraries. And
Yes,
those 3 are the
because-
ones that we showed before. and I
Right,
will
because
copy
we
and paste
really
this
don't
in
think
chat.
libraries are going to be discussing matters relating to maternity centers or racetrack things and stuff like that. So we've highlighted the ones that most often libraries use.
And I
So-
will find that sheet.
this is Patty. If I am on a board of a library who believes that they have had infractions, what do we do to fix the past and how do we move forward?
So if you have looked through your minutes and realize, oh, we haven't done this correctly, I would say within the last 2 or 3 months, let's say, I don't have a definitive answer on this. I would say that at the start of your next board meeting, so let's say that in May, and this actually happened in May at the CKLS board meeting, the reason listed to go into executive session was not said correctly. So at the June board meeting, at the very beginning, before we even did anything else, we made a correction to the previous month, and we corrected that and said that we went into a board meeting for this reason, and it was one of the 3 reasons. And so that's what we did, is we tattled on ourselves there and we corrected ourselves at the same time. You don't need to go back years and years and years to fix things. This is the new updated version. We really want to make sure that you're doing it right moving forward.
So how does this apply to online meetings and executive sessions?
It's exactly the same. If your library board is meeting online, you still are probably going to go into executive session for those 3 reasons. And for most of the library boards, it's going to be to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel. And so you're going to fill out that template again, and you're going to put in that it's to discuss personnel matters, and you're going to copy the statute up there, and it's going to be in quotation marks B, and then it's going to be quotation marks 1. And then you're going to decide how long you need to go in executive session, and you're going to go into executive session for that length of time. When that time ends, you're going to resume your regular meeting. If you have the public present, or if library staff members are there and you normally wouldn't invite them into an executive session, this is when it's really, really handy if you have Andy from CKLS helping you run that online meeting, because he can move those people to a different room. And then when executive session is done, he can move them back. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I have another question in the chat. Explain what non-elected personnel are.
So non-elected personnel are your employees who were not elected through an election. It seems like I'm being sassy, but I don't mean to be. These are your library staff members, your library director. These people were not elected, they were hired.
I think one thing to keep in mind is, of course, these laws that we are working with are not specific to libraries, but they're ones that libraries need to follow. And so some of the wording doesn't quite translate it perfectly.
No, it isn't.
So through the years of doing this, I've heard of different things that libraries have gone into executive session for.
Sure.
And that the one that comes to mind most often is when speaking about a situation regarding restricting use for a patron, or perhaps a situation with a minor.
So say a patron has done something really, really bad and they might be banned from the library for a month. Is that what you say? Something like that?
Yeah, looking at porn on the internet on a library computer. Let's
Okay,
use
sure.
that one.
Great. Let's just whip that right out there. So normally, if say this is he, I'm going to say he, maybe it's a she, I don't know who they, it's their 3rd offense. And so they're going to be banned from the library for a month. So there's no reason to go into executive session to discuss this. So as the librarian, I would let my board know that we had a patron who received their third strike for watching pornography, for viewing pornography in the library, and they have been banned from the library for 3 months. This is where your policies come in. They're very important. If you have a customer conduct policy or a patron rights policy, in your policy, it needs to say, it needs to be progressive discipline. It needs to say what happens if they're going to be banned, how long they're going to be banned for, and you have to mail them a letter. And then in that letter, it also has to say what's their grievance process, because they may think, oh, this is too strict, and they need to be able to appeal this ban to the library board. But at the library board meeting, I would tell my board, this is what happened. I wouldn't say it was John Doe or it was Jane Doe. I would not say the patron's name because that would violate patron privacy. I know who the person's name is. I don't need to tell the board that. Now, if it becomes necessary to permanently ban the patron, the board's going to want to know, but you don't need to go into executive session for that. And at a certain point, criminals give up certain rights, and this might be one of those things, but they would have to be doing something really, really, really bad for me to ever bring up the patron's name in a board meeting. But you don't go into executive session to talk about any sort of adult behavior like that.
So it's not the right of a board member to know that patron's name.
I wouldn't say a right or not, but you're just guarding, as the librarian, you're guarding that patron's privacy, because even if they've done things like that, they still have a right to privacy.
All right, do we have any more questions?
I know Patty asked about minors as well, and so I'd like to touch on that really quickly. So if you have the same situation where you have a teen you catch viewing porn on the library computer, you're going to follow the same process. You should not have different rules of behavior for children than you do for adults. You're going to turn to your policy and say, what does my policy tell me? My policy tells me this patron is banned for this long. I'm to write them a letter, and in that letter, I'm to tell them how they can appeal this decision. And that's what it is. And then when I go and I talk to my board, I might say, we had a teen viewing pornography on the library computer, and here's what I did. But again, I would not divulge the library patron's name.
Okay.
So I had a question in the chat. What if there are other visitors to the library board meeting? Do you are those conversations happen with them in the room?
Yes, unless you are talking about going into executive session for one of the 3 reasons: to discuss non-elected personnel, attorney-client privilege, and to buy property. Yes, you discuss that in the open, and that's why you don't say the patron's name. If you say the patron's name, you're violating patron privacy, and it needs to be in your minutes, which is an open record. So you don't say the patron's name. If there are visitors to the library, sometimes you may, as a board, say who's going to go into executive session with you. So if you're going to discuss the director's annual evaluation, what you might do is go into executive session once as a board to talk about the library director's performance. You can't vote in executive session. You can, however, come to a consensus, but no voting. When your time is up, you come out of executive session and go back into regular session. If you came to the consensus that you would like to visit with the library director about their performance, maybe they've been doing something bad, you can call another executive session, fill out your template and write down your reason, write down how long you'll be in, and you can invite the library director into the session with you. And then you'll close up the session in the same way.
I think it's kind of good practice to always run your library board meeting as if there's a guest watching. because it's going to keep you on your toes, but it's also going to help. It's like a practice run for when somebody actually does come to visit. I've been to several where I'm the first visitor in a while, and you can tell that the board is on edge because of it.
Right.
And you can't run a good meeting when your board is on edge. So if you practice running the board meeting, you would want a guest to see. You're gonna run a good board meeting.
That's
So
right.
speaking of guests, can guests talk in a meeting?
If the library board chooses to allow public comment, you may have guests talk in a meeting. So if you had a library board meeting last year via Zoom and Maribeth or Patty and I were there during that board meeting, you would have heard us say, "May I speak?" Because just because we're on Zoom with you doesn't mean we're part of the meeting. This is a formal meeting. We're just visitors, we're guests. Now, because of the pandemic, most of the time you did want us to speak. So what you can do on your board agenda, and this is what I do and I recommend it, is that you write executive session if needed right up at the top. And that way, if you need one, you can do one. And if you don't need to bother. Library staff get a little nervous sometimes when they see executive session on the agenda. And so if they see it every single month after month after month, they don't get nervous anymore. I had a question pertaining to the pornography example, and it was, would you write incident reports to document each infraction with the patron's name? And actually, yes, we would, but that would remain in-house. Only the library staff writing the incident report and the director would see those, and those would be kept confidential. Library boards would not be privy to those incident reports. Sometimes we do have to share incident reports with law officers.
And it may come to a time where those incident reports need to be used. So
Yeah.
they need to be identified. I was going to finish Gail's thought. I think she got a little off track.
I did. I got
After your executive session on your agenda, you can also have a place for public comment. That way, if somebody has one, you have it in the meeting on the agenda already. And it's just a regular part of your agenda every month. Most of the time, there's probably not going to be anybody there for public comment, but it's on your agenda. You can then limit how long public comment is going to go on. Say we will now have public comment for the next 15 minutes. Each speaker gets X minutes.
And
So
if you've got a pretty controversial issue, this is a good time to do that. If you've got someone who has said they don't want you to read the Worm Loves Worm storybook for story time because they think it portrays homosexuality, they might be wanting to ban that book. This is the reason that as a board, you may need to talk about this. Of course, you're going to use your policy to tell you how to proceed through these murky waters, but this is a time where you may want to go ahead and allow public comment because people may want to air their views. The board does not need to respond to public comment. You don't need to say a word. Just say, thank you, your 5 minutes are up. Next commenter.
Okay. Any other questions on Kansas Open Meetings Act and Kansas Open Records Act? I'm going to move us right along to our third item to talk about, and that is the ARPA grant.
Now we're talking about the good stuff.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see
Yes.
ARPA grant?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm nervous about it. ARPA grant is the American Rescue Plan Act grant. The State Library of Kansas has received, made a grant for $2 million for public libraries. Each grant can be between $1,000 to $25,000. A library must have a DUNS number to apply for any federal grant. So for this grant, your library needs to have a DUNS number.
You can't use the city's number. You have to have your own number.
Yes.
What the
There's
heck is a DUNS number?
It's a number that you need for your federal grants.
Yes, it is. It's a number that you apply for, and you have to have one to get any kind of federal grant.
I don't know what DUNS stands for. If you want me to find out, I can, but just know that you're supposed to have one.
If that were spelled without an S and a CE, I could tell you what it was for, but this way I don't know.
Dun and
It's a number
Bradstreet.
that Dun and Bradstreet.
Dun and Bradstreet. Yes,
Thank you.
Sorry.
No,
The
thank you
nerdy
for sharing. Whoops, thank you, Steve. I'm sorry.
Our nerdy accountant got it. Thank you, Steve.
So my city will know what this thing is? Who would I ask to know what this thing is?
Okay. So we're having a work session on June 25th at 1:30. We're going to go over how to get a DUNS number and all that at that time. I will also send out information. All the information you really need for your for this grant is actually on the state library. So let me see if I can find that here on my screen. If you go to kslib.info/ARPA, it'll take you to the ARPA grant. And it will have what you want right here is guidelines and instructions. I'm going to click on the project guidelines. And it may show up. There we go. And right there on page 2, it's going to give you a link to see if you have a DUNS number or a link to get a DUNS number. Now, it may take a little bit of time to get this number. So for the grant, you have to either have one or be already in the process of getting one. So if you apply for your DUNS number now, you will be eligible for this grant. I'll also read you the scope of the grant, and then we'll leave it open to some questions. But our work session is going to be June 25th at 1:30. It will be online.
And very interactive.
Yes. So the funding is to be used in helping communities respond directly and immediately to the pandemic, as well as to related economic community needs through equitable approaches. So here are the 3 priorities. Enable libraries to reach residents with internet hotspots, accessible Wi-Fi, and other digital inclusion efforts, particularly in the support of education, health, and workforce development needs. So if there's any technology needs that you have for health, education, or workforce development, might be the grant for you. Second is to provide rapid emergency relief to libraries across the country, allowing them to safely respond to the pandemic and implement public health protocols. To me, this means automatic door openers, automatic faucets, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Third, to support library services that meet the needs of the communities throughout the U.S., including costs such as personnel, technology training, materials, supplies, equipment, and associated indirect costs. Here are some allowed items, not limited to these, but this will give you the kind of idea. Collections, hotspots, printers, copy fax machines, wireless printing software, outdoor furniture, outdoor heaters, book bikes, plexiglass shields, digital screens, educational resources, remote access tools, online registration software. There are some restrictions. Cannot be used for advertising, marketing, or public relations, cannot pay for salaries, food or alcohol, performances, travel expenses, fundraising, advocacy, construction or renovation. So this is what I'm going to spend the time on. If you want to put out an outdoor gazebo, the grant could pay for the materials for the gazebo, but then the building of the gazebo would need to either be volunteer or funded from another source.
The wages.
Yes. So for example, you get the material for the gazebo and then you partner with the city and the city pays for the construction. It also cannot go for contract labor and the construction trades, architectural plans, cannot be used for services past the grant period. So it must all be expended by, I believe it's September 2022.
And it can't be for things that you've already purchased.
It's not a reimbursement and it's not to pay off debt. I'm going to put this link in the chat as well. And when I send out the archive, which will be tomorrow, I will make sure that these links are in there as well for you.
Yep. So we were up at a library and they have big, heavy doors and the community is older and they've been wanting to get handicap doors. And so this ARPA grant is perfect for that if you're clever. Remember, it won't pay for salaries. So they've worked and talked to the city already. They're going to purchase the equipment that turns their big heavy doors into handicap doors, and the city is going to provide the labor to get them installed. And that way then they've got great handicap doors. There are, like Maribeth said, well, why in the world would a library want to make a gazebo? Well, because maybe you're doing outdoor programming in the summer, and that might be something that helps continue the health of your community. Whatever item you choose, make sure it relates back to one of those three reasons, and you use that wording in there. Digital inclusion, we want to buy lending hotspots for our community to provide digital inclusion.
We've had a couple of questions. This is what it's going to show what this work session is really going to be about, because there are some of these things that we're not going to be able to tell you that fit that requirement, and those questions would go to Alice at the State Library, and we'll share her information. But I've had two already pop to me. One, board member asked if it could be used for Launchpad learning devices, and another one could be, could the grant be used to put in an outside book drop?
So this grant is a project-based grant. So the way you would want to write it is you have a project in mind. You have this great idea. We want to encourage early literacy in our community, and we're going to do a story walk, and we're going to do all computers. They all have to kind of go under the same theme. And then you write the grant. This is the equipment we will need: an AWE computer, plus all the stands and materials for the story walk.
And three launch pads.
And then you break it down, and then you say, and we have a volunteer who said that they would construct the story walk framework or whatever.
Sure.
It has to be connected to a project. You just can't list a bunch of things that you want with no story to connect them all together. You need to have a project to connect all
because
those
your
things.
project is digital inclusion and early literacy.
If
We're
that is
using
your
those
project,
things
yes.
Maribeth asked about.
Yes. So
And you've heard us say that the best advocacy that your library can do is telling your library story. Now gives you an opportunity as the board working with your library to figure out where there might be chapters of that story that are missing and how to complete that whole picture. And so I think Maribeth hit it right on the head. We all have a list of things that we want. But then now we have to look through that list and which things can we connect under a story.
So Bug
Some
Zapper,
things are not going to fit.
I see Bug Zapper as an obvious inclusion because you would use it to maintain the health of your collection and the health of your patrons by not bringing bed bugs into the library. That's an obvious one to me. Off the top of my head, someone asked, can the grant be used for an outside book drop? Right at this exact minute, I can't think of a way to include that. But give me some time and I sure could. Or you can go back and look, what are our three reasons? Does this fit into one of those projects?
All right, we have just a couple minutes left, so I want to open it up to any other questions on any other trustee topics that you have. It can be, of course, what we've already covered tonight, but if you have any others, because that's how we advertised it, and then things kind of
Fell apart.
blew up and we wanted to make sure that you had this other information.
I also just wanted to put a plug. If you need or would like for us to come and do trustee training on any particular topic at your library, just contact Maribeth. We're out and consulting again. We'd be glad to do that for you. Okay, we're here to answer your questions. Hit us.
This is Melissa at Kerwin City Library. We are rewriting our bylaws and all of the associated materials. Do you ever review those to make sure that we've included everything that you recommend, or whether they're superfluous, or is that something that you would do for us?
So Melissa, what you can, we do edits on bylaws and policies all the time. You guys do the work that you think needs to be done, and then you can send it to either Maribeth or I, and we'll make, send it electronically, and we'll make suggestions to make it clearer or to make sure that you're abiding by the law. And then we'll get that right back to you. We're glad to do that, to make sure that everybody is doing it the right way.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. I would also say, if your library board is experiencing some kind of problem and you can't seem to find your way straight again, please call us. This is the work that we love to do. We love to really help you. We believe that a well-trained board makes for an exciting library. And we are not the library police, we're your library friends. And we really just want to help every library get off on the right step, get those new board members well-trained and everything else.
Steve put in the chat what DUNS means. To me, I don't need to know the acronym. I just need to know what it's for. So it is
I wanted to know all week.
I was like, it's not something I'm going to keep in my brain. So it's the Data Universal Numbering System developed by Dun and Bradstreet.
Awesome.
I also wanted to thank you, Steve. I don't mean to say it's not important. It's just one of those things like I need it for this and that's all I need to know about it. I wanted to advertise our next trustee training meets. The next one is July. Oh gosh, I have to bring them up now in front of my brain.
I forgot to.
Is July. It's in person. It's at Russell Fossil Creek Conference Center. We are limiting it to 50 participants because really when it gets much bigger than that, it's too big of a workshop. And we're also trying to, keep our large meetings to as manageable as possible.
Yep.
And that will be,
go ahead.
That will be July 8th. And George Seaman from Northwest Kansas Library System will be our guest speaker. And he will be talking about future planning. And that will be between 5:30 and 8:30 with a meal. And then August 4th is an online meeting. It's 10 things boards do to sabotage the library. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. on August 4th, and it is online.
No, I tell you, that's my birthday, and this is the party they planned for me.
Yep, you betcha.
And Maribeth is conveniently going on vacation, so you have to show up because it can't just be me. But
She
I'll
needs
bring
that
cake.
vacation.
I planned it and then I leave. That's my superpower.
That's all right. I'll bring cake and wear a party hat.
So we'll be training on trustee basics again.
I'll tell you, if we hear enough from libraries that, boy, we need our trustee basics training back, we'll make it happen for you.
We'll make it happen. Let us know if that's something you really want. We do have the archive from last year about trustee basics, and that would be something that would be useful as well. Yes, this is recorded, and yes, it will be archived with all the handouts and all the links. If you would like a print copy of some of these things, please send me an email and request what you want. If you request it in the chat, I'm sorry, my brain is thinking about presenting and not about your request, and I'll forget. So please do me a favor and send me that email.
Yes, and if your board does want to watch the trustee basics from last year, be sure and send Maribeth an email and say, we watched the archive and who everyone was, and you're going to get credit for that.
And as Gail said, if you feel like your library board is in need of a personal touch trustee training, a combination of one or all three of us will show up on your doorstep. Or if it's just a matter of you just need that, you have a specific item that needs clarified, we're happy to call in or zoom in to a portion of a meeting. We don't have to stay the whole time. We do find that if we come to do a trustee training, you need to anticipate that your meeting is going to go long because we're going to spend 30 minutes to an hour. And it's not just because we are picking up and driving, but that is that we want to make sure that you get all the information that you need. So you anticipate a longer meeting, but make sure that that's part of the agenda when you put it out. So that's not a surprise if you do have visitors showing up at your meeting, that first portion of the meeting is going to be trustee training. And it's not anything special or secret that nobody can hear, but sometimes you need that actual person in the room. And maybe you're not ready to say you think that your board has a problem. So feel free to reach out privately to any of the three of us, but know that we will have a shared conversation and determine the best way to help you, either advise you over the phone or through email, or plan a trip to come and see you.
Yep, there's no problem too big or small.
And there's nothing we haven't heard.
This is true. Okay, I think we're done for tonight. Thank you all for being with us. How fun to have watch parties. And just really thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Have a super night. Take care of yourselves. We'll see
I'm
you all
gonna
again
stop the
soon.
recording.